Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. This episode of Word Balloon is brought to you by AlexRossArt.com. Alex is a brand new graphic novel coming out from Marvel and Abrams Books. Fantastic Four, Full Circle. It comes out September 6th. It's a rainy night in Manhattan, and not a creature is stirring except for the Thing, Ben Grimm. When an intruder suddenly appears inside the Baxter Building, the Fantastic Four find themselves surrounded by a swarm of invading parasites. These carrion creatures, composed of negative energy, come to Earth using a human host as a delivery system. But for what purpose? And who is behind this untimely invasion? The Fantastic Four have no choice but to journey to the Negative Zone, an alien universe comprised entirely of antimatter, risking not just their own lives, but the fate of the cosmos. Fantastic Four, Full Circle is the first long-form work written and illustrated by acclaimed artist Alex Ross, who revisits a classic Lee Kirby story from the 60s and introduces the storyline for a new generation of readers. Bold, vivid colors, his trademark visual storytelling, Ross takes Marvel's first team of superheroes to places only he can illustrate. The book also features a special poster jacket with the front flap unfolding to reveal an all-new, fully painted origin story of the Fantastic Four. Again, Fantastic Four, Full Circle, out September 6th. For more details, go to AlexRossArt.com. Out now from DC Comics, it's Dead Man Tells the Spooky Tales. Franco of Superman Adventures, Aw Yeah Comics, and Tiny Titans fame presents 15 tales narrated by Deadman himself, Boston Brand, that will shock and delight horror fans of all ages. 15 stories created by Franco and 15 amazing artists, presenting bold art and great storytelling. This is a great present for the fall and holiday seasons to young readers or to share with your children at nighttime story time. The book is out now from DC Comics. It's Dead Man Tells the Spooky Tales. Pick up your copy online or your favorite comic store today. Welcome back, everybody. Time again for another Word Balloon. Scene Missing, which has become an occasional feature with the guys that joined us for The Outer Limits and, of course, Kinescope. But now we've switched over to movies, and unfortunately we're on a streak of honoring the dead as they release the Mortal Coil.
Although, to be fair, basically everyone in every movie we've ever talked about has been dead. So, that's every show, it's the percentage of people who are alive is so slim that it seems like it's worth pointing out the ones that when they pass away more recently.
That's so true. Gabe Hardman, William Meyer, Ian Brill, and very psyched, guys, to talk about this movie, not only to acknowledge the passing of Jean Luc Godard, but really one of my favorite great French films, and that's Alphaville.
Now, when you guys brought this up, you didn't mention it was in French, so I didn't actually watch it.
Yeah, here's the problem here. We cover movies that are in English. This is some bullshit. I don't know how this happened.
You were further fooled by the fact that it stars an American.
Yes, exactly. Everyone's favorite Eddie Constantine.
No, I did take French in high school, but unfortunately it didn't help me. But I did watch the movie. I was kidding.
This is Alphaville. It's a 1965 Jean Luc Godard movie. It's sort of towards the later part of his Nouvelle Vague era. After his first movie was Breathless, and then he in 59, I think, and then he set about making different genre explorations, basically, he deconstructing genre by he did sort of a musical and sort of a war movie and all that sort of stuff but they're all a little difficult. They're all or at least they're not necessarily accessible movies, but they have but he is taking genre elements. He's doing stuff, and this is a very, very genre heavy movie in that it's a sort of detective story and it's a science fiction story, but treated in a very different way.
And it's a program film, so it's almost like, forgive the modern example, a Tarantino making a Marvel movie, because Lemmy Caution was a series of noir films in the 50s, and was this the final Lemmy Caution film?
Well, I mean, it was the last time that he appeared until like 1980, but he did kind of make little cameos as either Lemmy Caution or a kind of, understood to be Lemmy Caution sort of character in other movies and stuff later. But I think that up until the late 80s, this is the last one where, he's the main character,
Okay.
Isn't that briefly sort of like Toshiro Mifune playing Yojimbo in the Western, sort of like, it's him, but it's not him?
Yeah, no, that actually is a really good comparison. I mean, I think that the big weird thing here, though, is that those earlier Lemmy Caution movies are, junk. I mean, they're really junky,
Yes.
and they're, they're just kind of like, programmer crap that, and pretty silly, I mean, at least to the limited degree I've seen stuff from them. And I'm not saying Alphaville isn't silly. It is in a lot of ways, but
fun.
people, people come to it as this sort of like, oh, it's this art film, Godard, the Nouvelle Vague, all that sort of stuff. And to a degree, that's warranted. But we'll get into all that.
Well, and it's guerrilla filmmaking as well. Forgive me, William. And yeah, again, we'll get into it when we look at some of the images. But that's the thing. It's this futuristic city. And yet, much like, again, forgive the comparisons, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, where they just shot in Century City and said, hey, it's the future. This is modern 1965 Paris. And they just found, at the time, unique skyscrapers and other interiors that conveyed the future. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to touch on what Gabriel said, because you do, at least with the other Godard films, my personal experience, you have this, intellectual coldness to a lot of the form. He plays with form a lot, and the emotions in the film kind of are held at arm's length. But then in this film, not only does that feed into the authoritarian computer versus man theme, but then talking about the fun and the goofiness, you have like these, like in one scene, you have these two transients who are with one hand groping each other, and then with their other hand, they each have a box of Kellogg's Sugar Smacks, and they're just eating right out of the box. And you're like, I don't know what this is, but I enjoy this.
Do you know what the Sugar Smacks immediately reminded me of? And then it made me think of how this is strangely related. Is when we did Kinescope, and we talked about Captain Video, which was, I believe, sponsored by Sugar Max. That was also something where they were taking nothing. Now, in that case, they had like costumes, but they were taking nothing and saying it was the future, down to the fact, and I still love this, I'm still in awe of this, of showing old Westerns and just having a guy start and saying, like, these are Captain Video's agents out in the West. So I'm like, are these cowboys in the future or something? And just that idea of like, we're going to tell you this strange thing where you could get away if it was post-war modern Western world, you could say we're in the future by just shooting life as it is, and people would go with it. People believed they were living in the future.
I do think the difference here is that I don't think you're really expected to go with it. I mean, I think that there's a level of kind of ironic detachment to it. I think that it's not, it's not that you're 100% supposed to, in Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, it is that you're supposed to accept Century City as a place in the future. And there is a lot of kind of, post-war, mid-century modern architecture, French architecture, which was very, which is all stuff that had been built in the previous 20 years. So it all felt kind of new and sci-fi-ish to, at the time. And, but it's not all that. And it's, a lot of the hotel rooms and the streets and all that sort of stuff. It is just shooting Paris. I mean, it's a little bit of a, it's a little bit like, oh, we're all in on the gag. We know that this is not intended to be, the future for real.
And also,
Well-
it hits on. Oh, go ahead, William.
Well, I was just going to say, besides being in French and the lo-fi sci-fi angle of it, I saw Alphaville around the same time I saw Chris Marker's La Jetée, and
Yeah.
it just
that.
feels like that is a great double feature. Right?
It is
Yeah.
a great double feature. I do think that, I mean, you know, La Jetée would be an interesting movie to talk about. Certainly, La Jetée and 12 Monkeys, or whatever. But but like, I do think that Chris Marker's movie is a lot more like genuine and more genuinely emotional and more like, you
Sure.
know, and something where you're really investing in this. You know, it's also an experimental movie in a lot of, you know, it's still photos. There's no, you know, also exactly what William's saying. No special effects, no visual effects, no sci-fi elements to it except what you're told. But in that way, I do personally think it's a more effective movie for me, and it's a movie that I can invest in personally more. Where Godard's always keeping you at a distance, right? He's always sort of pushing you away by, you know, by the artifice of stuff, with the jokes, with the, you know, with all that stuff, which is fine, but it's not, you know, but by the end of this movie, when she's, you know, when she's come to understand, when Anna Karina has come to understand what love is, it's like, oh, give me a fucking break. Like, this movie doesn't really believe in this shit, you know?
Right. It feels like that ending to me is the last nail in the coffin, not a revelation of heavenly delight. It's like they are so dead inside. They can say the words, but there's no emotion behind
well,
it.
and words are a big thing throughout this, like with a lot of Godard stuff. But the, you know, an early thing in the movie is he goes and he checks into to a hotel. He tells them that he's Yvonne Johnson and that he's a reporter from Figaro Pravda, which is, you know, Figaro was the kind of like center right, as far as I understand it, paper in France. Pravda was like the, you know, organ of the Communist Party you know, in Russia. It was like, you know, it's like an absurd combination of stuff that wouldn't go together, you know. And and he's led up to the room by this woman in a trench coat, who's I believe a seductress third class or something like that. And she picks up a book, you know, she picks out the Bible from the drawer in the hotel room. But as we come to find out over the course of the story, the Bible is actually a dictionary. And you know, and and the dictionary is important to it all because this sort of, you know, totalitarian world that run by the computer Alpha 60, over and over, you know, like words are constantly disappearing, so the dictionary is constantly being revised to, you know, to limit their ability.
Even that moment where the guy comes into the room and he's like, "Here's the new dictionary," and then he leaves.
Yeah, right.
Well, and also, I do think, and we'll get into its influences, Alphaville's influences in the future, but obviously borrowing a lot from George Orwell's 1984 and Big Brother, and that's great. You know,
I think it's. I mean, I'm a little less great on it just because I think that I don't know that it's saying a hell of a lot. Like I don't. There's a lot about this movie. Okay, so we should, in a way, here. I'll say it first, but let's just talk about how we were exposed to this stuff in the first place, right? I mean, I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, I mean, I saw this. You know, I don't know if anybody can tell or could imagine this, but I was kind of a pretentious kid. So, like, I was, you know, like I was all, you know, I was watching these, you know, I got all into these Nouvelle Vague movies, and when I was like 15, 16, and like you know, I watched this on VHS back then, and I watched it a few times in New York, you know, in theaters when I moved there, and you know, and I was, you know, and I was really into it, and I think that I took it more seriously because I was a teenager, you know, and even though there's obviously goofy stuff in it, whatever, but I love the idea of this mixing genre thing and an arty movie that's a detective movie and a sci-fi movie. All that stuff is great, and all that stuff still sounds great, but I don't feel like it deserves maybe the level of seriousness that it's treated, you know. Like I think that a lot of the actual ideas it's expressing are pretty basic and not that sophisticated.
I have an appreciation of that sort of wacky pulp in the sense that you talked about the newspaper he allegedly worked for.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying I don't appreciate that
No.
stuff. I'm just saying, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to lead into how he also uses, like originally he wanted to call it Tarzan versus IBM, and how Lemmy Caution is going to Alphaville because he's looking for Dick Tracy and Flash Gordon.
Right.
And like the whole movie has these like wackadoodle references like Professor Heckle and Jekyll.
Yeah.
And like part of that is like a distancing technique, right? Like, because I mean, he's like positioning his story within these sort of absurdist pop culture references. I mean, look, it's Godard, Marx and Coca-Cola. Like, I feel like that one line, and this sounds like a diss, but it like covers like just so much of the thematic material where he just juxtaposes. I mean, everyone plays this movie so damn solemn, but it's like hilarious. Like,
yeah, it's a goofy genre exercise, and I mean, I don't think that, and I think a little bit of what I'm saying is much reacting to like, some of the research I've done on it, and the people, reading people talking about it, and the
audience perception is
ridiculous
elevated.
Way that people, people frame these movies that are often just kind of like either silly or somewhat empty exercises. I think Godard has in the past said, style is substance and stuff like that, but I don't know how much style it has exactly, but in a lot of ways I would, I'd rather see a Senju Suzuki style over substance movie because there's actual style in it, but there is a lot of interesting stuff to talk about the visuals of this and everything. I don't know.
What I think it is, I'm sorry. What I think it is though is an extension of like you said, his past examinations of genres through his films, and also he's like the reverse mirror image of Peter Bogdanovich, starting as a critic first, being an important voice as a critic, and then jumping into filmmaking. And well, what would happen if I made a screwball comedy? What would happen if I made a period piece?
Right.
And Godard was doing that. And yeah, I think you're right. Upon reflection, a lot of this stuff is surface stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's still interesting.
Definitely interesting. And I think that I think where Bogdanovich, I don't know, in some ways they were doing similar things though, because I mean, Bogdanovich is obviously much more in awe of those old movies, right? And is trying to emulate them in a lot of ways. But Godard obviously loves all those old movies, right? And he's and he's doing these kind of deconstructive things, which to some degree I think were real explorations of stuff, and to some degree I think are just kind of like a sloppy lack of technique, but,
okay.
I don't know.
I want to talk about the use of sound, and I think that point, what you did, because I'm interested to hear what you guys think, because this film, if you haven't seen it, this film has really what we would in modern terms call really crappy production sound, because not only are there, you can hear the fades from dialogue on location when they're not talking, but you can also hear they're using sound from multiple takes. So the background noise is different when you're cutting to different characters. Sure. And a lot of times characters will be doing something, and stylistically I appreciate this, but they'll be like no Foley. They'll just be the music, which is like a great bombastic. I heard someone refer to it as he wanted Max Steiner, but he couldn't get Max Steiner. So this is the music they use. Yeah. And after a while, like in the first 5 minutes, you're like, oh, did they not have the budget for sound? But then it becomes the style de facto, just because that's the way the film is, and the whole film is like that. And after a while, it just feels like part of the weird, disjointed nature of the story.
I actually agree with that, and and certainly like when I was younger, that was a huge appeal to these movies, right? That they are, that it feels like you're throwing away the rules, that you're, that he's, there's a kind of, there's a punk rock quality to it, right? Where but not just guerrilla. I mean, guerrilla filmmaking can also be emulating, something, more crafted or whatever, right? And this is just like, I mean, and almost all of these movies, I mean, he did approach them different ways. I mean, the My Life to Live, I think it's called I could be wrong. the Anna Karenina starring movie where she's the prostitute, and and it's very austere the way that it's shot. And this was shot by Raoul Cotard, and he was sort of hugely influential cinematographer. He shot all of these early Godard movies. He had been a war photographer. He was in Vietnam in the French, Indo-China War, or whatever it was called before we were involved, right?
Yeah.
And and so he spent years there as a war photographer, and then went on to work for Look magazine and Paris Match, like he is coming at this from a documentary perspective, and this movie, a lot of the griminess of it is that they basically shot it with no film lights. I mean, it's shot in black and white on these slow ass stocks from the time, right? And and there are times when the image is just shit, or it's whatever. I mean, particularly like, and where Godard would use it anyway, right? Like particularly like towards the end where, he, seemingly shoots Professor Von Braun, that shot of him, of Let Me Caution, and then him, tilting down to the gun to shoot. It's just an unusable shot, but they use it anyway, right?
But
That's what I appreciate about it. Go ahead, Ian. Keep going.
One of the other aspects that make it feel maybe not even documentary, but lived in is, and this is one of the things that really impressed me when I first saw the film when I was 19 or so, is that long unbroken take in the beginning in the hotel where you're literally following him in like this glass elevator, and I remember it dawning on me like we haven't seen a cut. Also, you don't usually see characters just walking to their hotel. That's usually the things movies edit out,
right?
Like this is life. We're going to look at how just people like live their life in this so-called future. Although one of the things I like about this film is the way it plays around with the idea of time. People talk about how the past and future don't truly exist. There's only the present. And I think that's fun to see when you're taking such an old school character like Let Me Caution, which I didn't know was a character.
Well, it's a science fiction movie that may or may not be in the future, and it's saying we never live it. We're always in the present, which is
one thing I love.
Fun. That's
fucking with you.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing about the big unbroken take where he's walking all the way up to the hotel room is that like one of the most famous early Godard formal things where he threw out the rule book or whatever is a scene in Breathless where Belmondo runs up a flight of stairs and they just cut out the whole middle part. So he just jump cuts from the bottom of the stairs to the top of the stairs because that part's boring, right? Like when he goes up the stairs, it's boring. Let's just cut that out of the middle of it, right? So it's just to some extent following, Eddie Constantine all the way up to the hotel room is a little bit like just Godard more fucking around with
a reaction to his
expectations.
Own work.
Yeah, and then that later is followed by such a cool cut that really impresses the 19-year-old buddy cinephile in me, where he shoots the gun and it cuts to the lighter. Now I think about it, like, what is he shooting at? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But I'm like, you watch it, I'm like, that's the coolest fucking thing.
His use of a gun throughout the whole film feels like an exclamation point that he just like chucks at people. Like it doesn't even feel like he's aiming necessarily. He's just sort of
that and that scene in the hotel room early on where the seductress woman gets in the bath and then the two thugs come in and then they kind of like the room seems to be a sort of circle, as a lot of the things in this movie are, and they kind of chase him and smash through multiple like window doors, coming after him. And then there's a kind of like, we pan off to him pulling the gun and then like whip back up to the guy getting shot as he falls down and maybe some kind of squid going off on the wall and everything. And it's a fucking really cool shot. Like there is a lot of, there's stuff you can get, an energy that you can get out of that kind of, semi-improvisatory, camera work that can be really amazing.
one of the ways to describe this film is that it does not feel like it was written, and I mean that in the best and worst ways.
Yeah, and it apparently barely was. So
yeah, but it doesn't feel like there are a lot of films, and sometimes films I really enjoy, but you can see the kind of screenplay marks it's hitting.
yes.
Sometimes that can be very satisfying, sometimes that can be very rote, and this just feels you don't have that sense of safety or recognition in something like this. You don't know what's going to happen.
And I think that is a lot what appeals to, like, you know, younger budding cinephiles about Godard, right? Like that you go along and you hear about all these rules and you've watched a bunch of movies, and then it's like, oh no, somebody's just going, no, fuck it. I can just cut out the part where he runs up the stairs. I don't care. I
said, like, I discovered this film at 15 or maybe younger. I'd read Sid Field's like screenplay book, and I'd seen all that stuff. And that book, I should say, like, is how I learned about like Chinatown and who like Robert Towne.
Oh yeah, because he makes an utterly bullshit argument for how the structure of Chinatown in that book that's ridiculous. But anyway, go ahead.
There's a parenthetical.
It's a weird book. Actually, now I think
it's an interesting book. It's a good book to read early on, but it's also a good book to think back on and go, wait a second. Like his whole thing about the midpoint. It's like, where's the midpoint in Chinatown? Well, I arbitrarily made it up somewhere here in the middle. You know, like
by the way,
his ideas are iffy.
Every screenplay book is taking a movie and adding a structure that I guarantee the creators were not thinking of.
Well, it doesn't even matter if the creators weren't thinking of it. I don't think it's actually in the film most of the time.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I want to really focus on Eddie Constantine for a moment because he absolutely fascinates me. And I understand that he was the star of these program Let Me Caution films, but I do harken back to Breathless and Godard's fascination with Bogart. And I'm sorry, there are just so many Bogart moments that Constantine has throughout this movie. And I love that about the movie and everything. And that he really, you know, again, he is, you know, his noir cipher that, you know, he's playing off of so dramatically.
And even if he's a little bit of a limited actor, and he's not French, so he's not speaking, you know, a native language, right? But he does carry that kind of feel very well. Like he gets across that classic Hollywood thing, and you know, in a way that, you know, is pretty effective.
Well, plus he's from the Outlands, so that sort of
contrast
really
and
works.
just we can talk about that in a minute.
But I was reading, and I don't know if this is true or not, because, you know, shame on me, I was relying on Wikipedia, but he came to France as a song and dance man.
I believe that's true. You can actually find like a 60 video whatever you call it, compilation type thing on YouTube of all of his songs. Like it's just like if they're not videos of him, they're just like the you know the records or whatever. And apparently he really was like a singer. That was his initial thing.
That's amazing to me because I actually wrote it down. One thing the Let Me Caution character says in narration, where he's actually talking about Beatrice, the level 3 seductress, the first one he meets.
Yes.
In the narration, he says, "I was struck by the hardness and sadness in her face." I'm like, I feel like that's what we're struck by when we see.
Look.
I mean,
John, how did you have that ready?
He's just.
He's a one-trick pony. That's what he gives you, man. He is the Buster Keaton of the '60s, the Great Stone Face.
He looks like if Jack Kirby drew Humphrey Bogart. Like
and then dragged him across the cement.
Yes, and also when I don't know if we'll talk about it, but if you see his performances in English, he has it feels like he's trying to do like a John Wayne thing, like a mix between John Wayne and Humphrey Bogart. It's weird. It's great that he had this career in Europe because he does feel like a caricature of an American.
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I liked his violent tick in the movie. When anyone would approach him, he would just slap them away.
Yes.
Especially when they would like want to help him with something, he'd just be like,
right. Well, like when she's trying to get the bag from him, he pulls it away. Right.
And also, I just love that he's constantly taking photographs. And I haven't read any subtextual, point of that? I mean, I know he's supposed to be a journalist, but also he's just taking.
No, but he's not. I mean, he's playing a journalist. He's a spy. Right. But like, he's also. Well, you can. There's all this stuff about light and dark, and the flashes are light, and.
William?
But, on the journalist point, on the version I watched, the translation was towards the end. He says something like, "Remember, both journalist and justice start with the letter J." But in the screenplay, there's an alternate translation that says "Revenger" and "Reporter" both start with the letter R. And I just thought, what an interesting. So I don't know if there are earlier prints with different.
And what's the French version of it too? Like, because two words that start with the same letter in French are not necessarily going to be the same.
Right.
That's like it's again, forgive the tangent, but how I remember reading an article about how sometimes foreign translations don't get it right, and they were pointing to a scene in God damn it, The Big Chill. Mm-hmm. And Jeff Goldblum says, "Can I bring a date to the premiere?" And it translated in I forget which foreign language. "Can I bring a fig to the premiere?" And it's like, no, wrong date. All right, but okay.
When Criterion upgraded their translation of The Seventh Seal, it lost one of my favorite jokes, and I'm just publicly decrying that right now. Sorry.
What was it? Tell me.
It was a joke about Satan squatting on the shore, and then they do the caw.
Yeah.
And anyway.
But I love the use of, what was, I suppose, cutting edge technology, but also incorporating very simple, like, look at those shelves that these TV monitors are sitting on and stuff. Oh, that's the future. All right.
Right.
Or even
also,
I mean, the microphone shot again.
Alpha 60. Like, he's just, Alpha 60 is a light, a single light, some moving microphones, and at times a fan with a light.
I love the fan
through it.
Yes.
But the one thing about like the light, particularly, there's one with like a kind of cage on it that we, I think they're different lights that we see for. For Alpha 60. But like when I first saw this movie on VHS, you could not read that it was a Westinghouse light bulb inside it the way that you can on the transfer now.
But we have to talk about the most incredible part of Alpha 60. It's the first sound I believe you hear in the film.
Yes.
Is that he is voiced by, we don't know who it is, a person stayed anonymous, but a person with a mechanical voice box. And this is a 1960s mechanical voice box. And you can hear like that person like swallowing for air while they speak. And it is such an incredible sound. And it's strange to think like the people who live in Alphaville would hear that sound all the time and not go. Well, actually, they do talk about how people just kill themselves and go insane. But it is such a disturbing. I love it.
It's very grating. It's very grating to listen to. Yeah.
I like how it's presented without any worldizing. So it's never like treated with reverb or anything of the space that the characters are in. So you get the sensation that it's not only ubiquitous, but it's like omnipresent. And it's the voice of every machine, which I also love. Like whether you're calling for room service or you're being threatened by the authoritarian master machine computer, it's the same voice.
Big Brother's controlling everything, absolutely, which is interesting.
One of the things that about, so I mean, there's all this business about the outer countries,
the outer
countries,
and and also about coming for other galaxies, right? Like talking about galaxies and stuff, and and of course. He just drives to Alphaville, right, in a Ford Galaxy.
A Ford Galaxy, exactly,
because dumb jokes are the order of the day in this movie. But in other discussion of this, a lot of people have gone, back and forth about is he traveling through space? Are there other galaxies? Is it blah blah blah? And I think that to me, watching it this time, it seemed more like it's a word that they like a kind of recontextualized word that they would use inside of Alphaville for other parts of the world, right? Instead of, what I mean? Like, because it's so cut off and because so much of the movie is about like changing words and their meaning and stuff like that, and removing words from the lexicon and all that sort of stuff. So like if it seems a lot more like he's not literally coming from another galaxy. It's, and they do just drive away at the end too. I actually but even if you take it as he is going, they are going to go to another galaxy and they're driving to another galaxy, I still like that. The totally incongruous thing, absurdist thing is still fun.
Well, the Von Brauns it's revealed they're actually from New York, right?
Right. Yeah. And yes. So
in the treatment, by the way, his name, instead of Von Braun, his name is Leonardo da Vinci.
Oh, really? That's funny because, and I guess that could tie. There's a clear tie back on the kind of mechanical stuff and invention and everything with Da Vinci. But the reference is a lot of the references in here are way more, like Fermi and all these people are, it's about the bomb, it's about the war, and all this sort of stuff. Also, we're talking about he's Professor Von Braun, who was previously known as Professor Nosferatu. Very subtle, and he's the father of Anna Karenina, who is the incredibly beautiful actress that Godard was married to at the time, although this is near the end of their marriage, and she starred in several of his movies.
They also keep flashing E equals MC squared, and then the other formula, which I had to look up, E equals HF, which is the Planck-Einstein relation, which I don't know the words I'm saying, but apparently has something to do with the effects of radiation.
Okay.
Interesting.
It's a pseudo-intellectual nonsense, right? It doesn't mean any. Does it mean anything in this movie?
It's about how that is that Alphaville is run by Alpha 60. The idea is they are so believe that science can run a person's life, and that if it's scientific, if it comes from computers and
also
like this, it must be working. Which is
also they're running out of energy, right? And both those formulas have something to do with
So
how about Akeem Tamiroff, who I always love seeing in everything he does, whether it's Ocean's 11 or Touch of Evil or this movie. Honestly, what a great character.
And also he's in Preston Sturges movies. He's in his career just spans everything. He's the greatest. I suspect Akeem Tamiroff could speak French about as well as I can, because I don't think that he's so limited in what he says in this movie, and it really doesn't seem maybe I'm totally wrong,
would you guys maybe know more than me, but no one is dubbed when Eddie Constantine is speaking, he's actually speaking French.
I believe so. And he was in
he was there long enough that, and again became big enough celebrity that I'm sure was fluent in the language and everything to make these films.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that everybody. I don't think anybody's dubbed. I think these are all done.
That character, by the way, in the treatment is listed as a Lee Marvin type.
Interesting.
And the pair of them meet at a saloon in the wasteland before they go to his apartment, as seen in the movie. And when they get to the apartment, instead of what happens in the film, the character is just shot dead. Just a little.
So you're talking about the script. So the thing about this that I don't understand, I'm not sure anybody does, is but somebody does, just because I don't know, it seemed like wasn't there a shooting script for this? Godard seemed to he commissioned someone to write a script, and then and it was supposedly he just sent it to the financiers and never looked at it again or something. But
the idea of this movie having a script has disgusted William. This movie would be found by the written word. This movie is about how the limitations of language. So how
can it off camera? So that's how disgusting poor William was.
Yeah. So I'm sorry for my controversial take there, William. That made you leave.
Drove you from the camera, William.
But yeah, no, I'm just wondering, did you find out any more about like what, where the script you're looking at came from, like who wrote it and what
Stand by, William.
So this edition says that the translator wrote the dialogue after the fact.
Okay.
And that there was no written dialogue for the shooting.
Okay.
And it includes the treatment in the back.
And that treatment is the treatment like the 30-page treatment that he commissioned from the guy that then,
No, this according to the preface, it's the original 10-page treatment that Godard wrote.
Okay.
And it's just a present tense, Lemmy cautions, driving his car, Lemmy caution does this. And then he meets so-and-so. And there are a number of differences that I thought were pretty funny. And one of which I wanted to point out to you guys is, in parentheses, it says, Lemmy is a gentleman with the ladies. and I thought maybe that got left out somewhere.
They forgot about that line.
Yeah. When he's not beating them up or whatever.
William, who put out that book?
Who's it? The publisher, you mean?
Yeah.
Let me see. Lorimer?
Okay, because I have, I think... Oops. BFI, like they did a lot of screenplay books. I have like the Goodfellas one, but this one, and I wonder if this is the case with yours. It's not really a screenplay; it's a more of a transcription. Like this is literally a transcript. This screenplay is the final continuity script prepared by Thelma Schoonmaker. So, like, I think a lot of these were the transcriptions that an editor makes of the film.
That was my worry, but this actually is different. Well, first off, the script is formatted more like a play script than a film script.
Yeah, all of those usually are, though. Like back then, like they would never format them like a film script.
But
I mean, the published versions of them, obviously, film scripts.
Lost my train of thought there. So I just checked the final scene, and it's different enough where this isn't conformed to the final release.
I'm trying to bring up the image because I love the idea that he goes to that negative presentation, and now the problem is solved, and it's it's a reverse image. To literally say, "Oh, I've cleaned up this town before I leave." Here we go.
Yeah, although he can never, Godard can never quite. It's like he'll have an idea like that, but there's always some disruptive part of it. Like it's not, it can't be just that it's, that we've made this point and it's, we're in negative world now or something like that. It arbitrarily switches back and forth during the shot.
That is, one of my favorite things about Godard, though. Like Godard, I like to say is one of my favorite directors who I've seen maybe 2% of his output, but he is well, from what I've seen, incredibly inelegant. Whereas a lot of directors I like, David Lynch, Kubrick, there is an elegant, like just it feels like there's a strong, steady hand on the final product. That is not the case with Godard at all. And I think that's some of the appeal, that it's a shit ride.
It is, yeah, and it's I don't think that it's not deliberate. I do think it's all deliberate. That it's a deliberate kind of like, it's deliberately irritating in a lot of ways. William, you were talking about the big bombastic score. Well, those cues just stop mid-shot times, and they don't really fit what's going on. They're not and he did that a lot. He did it increasingly through those more experimental movies he did later. But where those elements were just they're all there to push you away. But you bring a certain kind of expectation to this big bombastic score like that, and he's still gonna put it kind of in the wrong place, or or use it in a way that is disruptive to to just enjoying the movie on a surface level.
Just like Ian said, I've only seen a small percentage of Godard films. I'm certainly aware of the rest, but my first exposure to this film was having already seen Breathless in a film class, and hearing what this movie was about, and thinking, "Oh wow, I can't wait to see, what he's going to bring." And then actually seeing the movie, it was like, wow, it is so low tech, and yet it's supposed to be the future. And I wasn't expecting the level of it being a noir as it was. So it really was like, okay, this is a very different movie than I expected, and it was exciting to see it that way too.
Yeah, I mean, yes, yeah, no, I agree, and that's how I felt about it too. Like, I think that it's not a bad thing that that I'm going to look at it different when I'm 48 than I looked at it when I was 17. I mean, but I think that there is a little bit of a disconnect with the way that people approach it. But I have seen those. I've certainly seen all of those Nouvelle Vague era Godard movies, right? And to one extent or another, the later ones. I mean, this is 65. Weekend is the one that is kind of the last quote unquote like mainstream movie he made, like watchable movie he made. And then he goes through a whole phase of these after the kind of Paris 1968 uprising stuff. He goes into his full on Marxist phase for a while there, and holy shit, are those movies impenetrable and
hilarious.
Not particularly interesting, I don't think.
No.
But
Chikuro, I real fast because I want to acknowledge this. And finish your thought, Gabe. Excuse me.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, Chikuro Rojo says he hates to admit it. He's only seen Godard's Hail Mary. He's seen, however, Godard's influence in film, anime, comics, but sad to say I haven't seen a lot of his work. And please, Gabe, if there is more, I did want to transition to let's talk about the films and television that Alphaville did absolutely influence.
Can I name one scene before that happens?
Yeah.
Just
Sure.
Because I'm really shocked we haven't talked about it yet.
Go for it.
Because to me, it's the indelible. It's the fulcrum of the whole movie, and that's when they go to the swimming pool executions.
Yeah.
And so those condemned to die, they line up as you see there on your screen now, and they walk onto the diving board, and they're usually given a last minute free for all speech. But apparently they've all been condemned to die because they've wept over something. Someone's wife died, I think, and he made the mistake of crying. And so the ritual begins with them being machine gunned, and they fall in the pool, and then all those sirens just jump into the pool with their knives, and they swim and they descend on the condemned, and I don't know.
Yeah, like a murdery Esther Williams movie. Yeah, it's
it's so
but
compelling.
it also has that element of like you shoot them and you stab them, like
he's not dead
murder him as many times as you can until.
Also,
And then there's applause.
You're meant to believe that
Everyone claps then.
Alphaville is a city ruled by logic and ruled by Alpha Pixie's perfect logic, and like
No room for emotion.
what's cool about this?
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true, and that is a fun aspect of it.
Before we leave Godard himself, I just thinking about all the jankiness maybe of his filmmaking and why it appeals, especially when you discover them as a young cinephile, is things like score and editing and sound design. We're told that these are invisible arts, and that if they work well, the viewer won't notice them. And Godard is like, when you're the age where you start to notice them, Godard is like the guy who's like, no, let's notice this. It's fucking crazy. Yeah. We put music over. It's like, let's fuck around with it. And like, when it's just fun to eat that up, to just like, let's make it completely disruptive. There's
a great Eisenstein quote about what you're talking about, where Eisenstein is like, if we do not elevate the arts to be self-aware or whatever, and I'm totally messing it up, and I apologize for even bringing it up because I can't remember it, but he agrees. Let's look at the seams. Let's acknowledge.
Yeah. I mean, and he was approaching things from a very formal, expressive
right.
way.
It's the formalism that they're both kind of have in common, I guess.
Time, yeah.
Before we get to the obvious influences that I'm sure we'll want to talk about, I want to throw out there, I don't know if you guys know this show well enough, but it's one of my favorite 60s TV shows, and that's The Prisoner.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
And
Wait, John, what are you talking about? Like,
Well,
that we won't
I know
The
you're aware of
Prisoner?
I know you're aware of The Prisoner. Do you know about the specific episode I'm about to talk about, Fuckface? Or are you going to be a schmuck and just go, well, yeah, of course, The Prisoner.
There was never an episode called Fuckface.
John,
Is this
John,
which
come on.
No,
line?
but I'm just saying, don't be.
Jesus
don't
Christ,
be-
John, dial it the fuck down, okay? Like we can have a conversation.
I understand, but let me explain. There's an episode called The General, and I don't know if you remember it, but the whole thing is very Orwellian, and in fact, much like Alpha 60, there's a big computer that's running everything, but also they have a thing called speed learning where they get into your brain, and by rote, you are you're taught these things, but really it's just very specific facts. You are devoid of emotion and all that stuff. Would you agree, guys, that this is? Have you seen this?
Absolutely.
I've not
Yeah.
seen that one.
I do
It didn't
remember the
occur to me
episode.
until rewatching Alphaville how much McGowan borrowed. So apologies. Continue.
Yeah, no. I do think that's absolutely. Do remember that episode, and I do think that's a good call. My God, the Star Trek comparison. I mean,
is that called a
Which
Pipe
one?
Little War?
Well, I mean, particularly the isn't it the one with Val and the
the app.
and
also Landru.
Is that the app? And maybe it's Landry that I'm thinking of. The where basically they're Captain Kirk blows it up with logic or whatever, and and this has Lemmy Caution reading poetry to Alpha 60 in a very similar sort of way.
But even that Prisoner episode ends with what screws up that computer is number 6 just asks him a simple question, and it's why.
Yeah. Well,
and
that's a very. I mean, that basically is a similar thing in this. I mean, it's a I mean, that specific thing about why, and that why is not a question that you can ask.
I wonder
if world.
I wonder if they called him on that back in the 60s, given that it was only literally 2 years after Alphaville, and also the likelihood that in Europe, Godard was playing all, and we know these movies and also Constantine movies were being played all over the place because they, again, international film was just all over.
I believe in the collective unconscious and sort of tapping into the river, and especially the zeitgeist of the time. I mean, there's a lot of manifestations, similar.
Okay. Well, I also just think that it's probably not illegitimate to steal stuff. I mean, certainly from Godard. I mean, he is a guy who's kind of synthesizing pop culture into something different. He's bringing all that shit into his movies. Why? I don't see that there would be a problem with McGowan, kind of like referencing something like that. And, I mean, it's all sort of part of the same kind of thing,
I guess, but again, it really hit me in a way that, again, having, I guess maybe I saw the.
But I think it's probably I'm not super deep knowledgeable about science fiction prose, like mid-century science fiction prose. But I would imagine this is not the kind of idea that was knocking around a lot as well, right? I mean,
fair enough, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, the ubiquitous voice in The Village, of course, would be today's flavor is strawberry.
Right, woman.
Right.
Good morning, good morning, rise and shine.
Right.
But no, I absolutely. Well, go on, and I know Ian, you're burning with one of the influences you wanted.
Oh well, yeah. One of my favorite movies, speaking about Kubrick, is 2001: Space Odyssey. One of my favorite characters is HAL 9000, who is a beautiful, innocent child who did nothing wrong. He was just corrupted by humanity's deceitfulness, and that's why he went a little crazy. And it's clear, yeah, when watching this, and I'd seen both films plenty of times before, but I guess I'd seen 2001 maybe recently, and here I made the connections of the way Kubrick shows HAL 9000, the fact that he's just that still image of an eye looking at you. I have to imagine, I don't know if anyone involved in the 60s Star Trek had ever seen a Godard film, but I have to imagine Kubrick did. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think Kubrick did. I don't think it's impossible that people who were working on Star Trek saw, Alphaville or whatever. I mean, there was, there was a real, like, kind of art house, insurgent art house thing going on, at that point. Absolutely. And people did go to see these foreign movies, and there was it was a vogue for them, and I think it's entirely possible that a lot of people who, worked in stuff, I mean, maybe not, but certainly entirely possible. It's not like they couldn't have seen them,
Yeah. Gene Roddenberry was chasing some girl who wanted to see a Godard film, and he was like, all right.
Yeah, probably. Yes.
And then, of course, Blade Runner. You can't help but notice the similarities.
Well, actually, it's funny you say Blade Runner, because what I was thinking after this is what many people say is the influence on Blade Runner, which is The Long Tomorrow, the Dan O'Bannon Mobius story. Strangely enough, another collaboration between an American and a French artist. I don't know. I have to imagine that had been something of an influence, but of course that's taking the mix of private detective and sci-fi. Of course, that blows the sci-fi up even further, and it's huge. It's not lo-fi at all. But
absolutely, LA of 2019 and Blade Runner much more high tech than Paris with its radio towers and microphones and everything of 1965.
If we're throwing out visual similarities, I'd like to suggest Let Me Caution being interrogated by Alpha 60 has a certain resemblance to Robert Duvall entering the confession booth in THX 1138.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Lucas, I'm sure, watched this movie a billion times.
No fucking question. There is no question about that. Certainly, and look at the original short, the THX short, even more so.
Absolutely,
and definitely, he was inspired, just like as far as the kind of
aesthetic,
editing aesthetic, and all that sort of stuff in his earlier shorts.
I'm with
too,
you.
But
even the visual aesthetic too. I'm with you.
Cutting away to typography. Really great.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think with those earlier things, like I don't know if you've seen those. There's the THX short, but there's some earlier George Lucas like USC films and stuff where he's actually kind of taking. Like they're really formally interesting, right? Like he's taking a lot of these ideas but speeding them way the fuck up and like doing very dense things with with the cutting and with the montage and everything. They're worth checking out. Like they're kind of exciting movies to watch.
And also one of the things people talk about that Star Wars introduced en masse is the idea of. And Star Wars doesn't take place in the future, but the idea of something space age feeling old, as opposed to pristine and clean, like Star Trek, like 2001. That maybe that seed was planted with something like this. I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly could have been. But definitely that THX. I mean but I think that probably one of the ways that it doesn't feel as exciting of a comparison to me with THX is just because THX is kind of dumb Orwell type fake shit too, right? I kind of love that movie. I'm not actually saying it's a bad movie.
I think it's his best movie.
It's an interesting movie.
Pretty great. Aesthetically, it's amazing.
Yes.
It's there's so much great stuff in it. And heart, it's a little simple, right? But I feel like
I'm having flashbacks.
You're saying a George Lucas story is simple.
What are the odds? Exactly.
Wait,
Jeez, have you not seen the intricate plot of Red Tails and American Graffiti, of course?
Well,
so
George Lucas, he.
I have a huge
when he hits on something simplistic, I think he gets excited. He doesn't go
there's also. There's a lot to be said for iconic, for bold, for for things. I'm not joking. For stuff that is, broad strokes that work and are and let you bring in different elements. That's a lot what Godard was doing.
That goes right to Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics.
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
Totally. It doesn't have to be, I mean, I think that the problem with stuff like that is the dogmatic aspect of it, but like it, but by all means, that's a totally like valid way to approach stuff. That a kind of universality that then is,
Let us supply the
yeah.
missing
Right,
goods.
right.
I'm
absolutely.
reminded of a quote between Stephen De Souza and Walter Hill on the making of 48 Hours, a film where two talented guys who I really admire, they did not get along in the making of that film. And at some point, Hill had Nick Nolte do something. Oh, Nick Nolte putting Annette O'Toole's like a reminder of her in his car, and almost like the way ancient, medieval knights would wear their lady's brooch in a battle. And De Souza picked up on that and said to Walter Hill, like, "Oh, I get what you're doing there. Isn't it kind of a stereotype, though, kind of old?" And Hill looked at De Souza and said, "When I do it, it's an archetype." And I think
right. Well, I think that probably look. I'm on the Walter Hill side of this, but I also think that he's a like a talented person, unlike the writer that you're talking about. But the
you don't like Street Fighter?
But
that movie had a huge influence. That movie made a huge impact on me as a kid.
Well, and I'll balance that by saying I got the opportunity to interview Walter Hill when I was at my sports station when he made his unfortunate film Undisputed, which is not A-level Hill, but it still afforded me the opportunity to talk about the Warriors and a few other things with him. So
Streets of Fire, I love.
We absolutely talked about Streets of Fire. So,
I love that movie.
So we were talking about influences and stuff, but
please
do we? There's one direct connection to Alphaville, a later Godard movie, which is a quasi sequel to Alphaville from 1991 called Germany Year 990, which is it's an hour-long shot for television movie, and it is impenetrable, I guess. Like it's something, I don't know. I saw it when it came out, like it was released in New York, like 91 or 92 or something like that. And I went to see it, I think at Film Forum or something, because I was a big fan of, Alphaville and everything. And I saw a lot of Godard movies through the 90s and stuff. Like I would go out of my way to see them in the theater. But I had a really hard time revisiting it. It doesn't, like, I couldn't there. It's not online it's not streaming any place subtitled. There's like one version of it on YouTube that's the full thing, but but it's unsubtitled.
German.
And then French and German throughout it, but it's kind of like Eddie Constantine's character, Lenny Caution is in it, but he is basically just wandering through Europe at this point, I presumably shot in around 1990 when, the Soviet Union is about to fall and like everything is changing. And it's basically, I mean, for the most part, it seems like the only point it really has to make is that he's again someone who's out of time, who is not, who basically he's a secret agent who has nothing to do in this world where everything has changed around him, but which sounds more interesting than the movie actually is. It's like there's not, it feels more like an essay or something than it does a narrative film.
It's a polemic,
but it is a little bit interesting. Also, Eddie Constantine of 1990 looks kind of like Eddie Constantine of 1965. Like I was listening to somebody else talk about this, and I think it was on the projection booth, and they did an episode years ago on Alphaville, and they were like, Eddie Constantine, he looks the same in 1965 as in 1991. It's like he hasn't aged a day, but like he was born at 55 years old. Like he just consistently looks like this grizzled old man forever.
Yeah.
It's it's funny. There's some people like that. I remember, this is weird to admit, I had once spent an hour looking up, trying to find pictures of a young Abe Vigoda, just to be like, what did he look like when he was young? Like, because we think of him,
the earliest is The Godfather.
If you watch, the sitcom he's on, that
Barney Miller,
Barney Miller, they're making jokes about him dying in that show. and I'm like, yeah, he was a kid. He was a baby at some point. And there's like no pictures of like him. I'm like, what does that look like?
His brother was a golden age of comics artist.
No,
Really?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I as we're recording this, I had a conversation earlier today with Drew Friedman. We talked about his new book about the underground comics.
Yeah.
But he did those golden age, portrait books as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Vigoda's brother is actually in there, which blew my mind.
Is it Chuck Vigoda?
I don't remember his name.
I don't know.
What's
his name?
Buzz Vigoda. I have no idea. I have no idea.
Rance Vigoda.
And while we're on comics for a second, Gabe, fantastic job in that Kolchak story.
Oh, is it Bill?
Cool. Yeah,
I got the digital copy.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I could not wait to start reading it. Everybody in there, and again, we're all big fans of the Night Stalker.
It's a super fun collection. I got the digital version. I was able to look through it. I had loads of fun working on the story, and everybody did a great job on that.
Yeah, so man, everybody brought.
So check it out. It's like the 50th anniversary Kolchak the Night Stalker comic.
And
it was kickstarted. I'm not entirely sure how you can get it otherwise.
Well, I was going to say after I'm sure all the Kickstarters are fulfilled, it was made in conjunction with Moonstone. And Moonstone owns the Kolchak, or I should say, has the Kolchak license, has for about 15 years now, and originally did it with when Jeff Rice was still around, which is pretty cool. And my good friend Doug Klaba has done 1 million painted covers of Kolchak for both their prose books and their comics of Kolchak. So no, it really is. It's amazing. So.
Cool. Yeah, I highly recommend picking it up if you can. It did come out looking really well, and and a lot of fun stories.
Are we going to talk about the other Eddie Constantine movie?
I certainly wanted to, Ian, before we leave, and again I watched it as well, and I loved it. But yeah, please.
It is okay. This movie is on free on YouTube. I don't know the legalities of it. By the way, whoever owns the copyright. 10 gets you 50. They don't know they own the copyright. There's no C&D are hitting these guys. But there was a British film called, well, it has two names. On IMDb, it's called Room 43. But on YouTube, you'll look it up with I love this title so much more, A Passage to Shame.
I know. It's such a good title.
1958?
I think that's right.
Film about prostitution rings in Britain. Eddie Constantine plays a Canadian, actually, in that movie. And he gets caught up, him and then a woman from France get caught up in this prostitution ring because they're both they're both under the thumb of Herbert Lom, who we know from the Pink Panther movie, who has this great look in the movie because he's got a Savile Row suit, but he also has a cane and black gloves in a proto giallo kind of look, and I'm like, this is I want this look, and it is it's a film that is preceded by a disclaimer by a Scottish Yard Flying Squad guy, and who seems like a character out of Monty Python, but he's real. You're expecting it like a joke to happen, but no, that's just how things were in the 50s. Like a guy could be that square and speak to you and people would be okay with it. They wouldn't try to undercut it. And there is a pretty, I actually thought impressive hallucination sequence kind of near the end of it. The young French woman is given a jazz cigarette and starts having visions. In
Not
a way,
how jazz cigarettes work, but go on.
Yeah, which who knows what this was laced with.
Sure.
And it's actually, I think, really impressive. It has, I suggest checking it out as a, if you like, if you ever seen like those pre-horror Hammer films, Cash on Demand, which I think is a great movie. These like 50s black and white British crime films, kind of like the films that David Lean made before he started making the epics or stuff like that. It's worth checking out. It also is a early work from Nick Regg and John Glenn. John Glenn, who directed, I think, every James Bond movie in the 80s.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
For better or worse.
It may be all of them from the 80s.
He was the first unit director on earlier
second
ones
unit,
before, or pardon me, second unit before he took over directing. So last question regarding Kolchak. Gico Rojo wants to know if Evan Dorkin, a fellow Kolchak fan, had a chance to see the comic. I have no idea. Maybe he backed the Kickstarter. I didn't know if you ever had any contact.
I'm not going out of my way to find out what people think about my stuff. So it's I mean, I don't know. Hopefully he enjoys it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Final
thoughts.
Admirer of his work.
Final thoughts, boys. I think we did a good job beating this dead horse.
I mean, I just think that it's like, for me, I find it really interesting to just go back and revisit some stuff to see how it plays different for you at different times, and movies like these particularly are definitely that kind of thing. I mean, I wasn't able to watch all of the British movie that Ian was talking about because I just ran out of time. But like when I started watching that, I was like, I had this, like after watching a bunch of Godard stuff, I was like, I had this kind of like involuntary feeling of, craftsmanship. This is pleasant. But that said, there is just a lot of it's interesting to go back to stuff like this and find it less than you remember or more than you remember or different things about it. And so I just appreciated the chance to go back and like kind of seriously look at it.
No, and I'm with Ian on that movie as well, in terms of I'm a big fan of like British 50s and 60s movies.
Yeah.
What's the McGowan Othello that they made a modern jazz movie out of? And I think
I've seen that.
I think it's called All Night Long. Turner Classic has played it a few times, and he's McGowan's the Iago to the black actor who plays the jazz Othello, and he's his drummer. And it's this awesome like jazz combo and stuff. It's a great movie. So.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a movie, damn, I'm not sure that I can remember the name of it, but it's like, I don't know, Hell Drivers or something like that. I can't. Is that right?
No, I know what you're talking about. It's the Sean Connery.
Yeah, Sean Connery's in it.
It is. I want to say it's Hell Drivers. That sounds right.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Damn close, if not.
Wrong.
But I know what you're talking about. Absolutely.
It's not exactly a crime movie, but it is such a great movie. And and I'm just recommending it because black and white British movie, of the era.
It is. It is. You're right, Gabe. Hell Drivers, 1950.
But also Herbert Lom.
And there's but I do like the British movies of that era too. Like there's a lot of good stuff in there in those early Hammer movies, and like the pre-Dracula Hammer movies and stuff. Like there's a lot of great stuff to find.
Look Back in Anger, of course, and James Mason's early 50s stuff. There's a shit ton of great stuff. Absolutely, man. So perhaps a future subject for us to cover here on See Missing.
If we find something more obscure than live, actually more or less obscure than live 50s TV, it would be 50s British films.
Maybe, I don't know. I feel like they're neck
I
and
would
neck,
love
but like
for Americans certainly, but
that's true.
I'm sure Paul Cornell and a few of the other Brits would be like, fuck you. We already know.
Not only would they be fuck you, they'd be like, these idiots aren't even understanding anything culturally about what's going on in these movies.
At San Diego Comic-Con, one of my first years, we did a How to Podcast panel, and this lovely young British woman is like, I'd like to podcast, but I'm afraid that my accent might be off-putting to an American audience. I'm like, ma'am, that's your language. We're the farmers that dumbed it down. Believe me. We'd welcome a nice, pleasant voice.
We've probably heard a little bit of it here and there too.
Absolutely. Hey, Tachi Zonchik is jumping in. Enjoyed
the
talk.
Thanks so much.
Brilliant artist.
How you doing, man?
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm so glad you're popping in.
By far, one of the most talented people in comics.
Yeah,
100%. He says enjoyed the talk. With something like Fassbender world in a wire count as stuff being directed or influenced by Alphaville, maybe already covered. No, we didn't mention Fassbender.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'd have to take a look at that. Or certainly, it's been a long time since I've gone down the Fassbender road.
Yeah, I would. And World of that's a huge one too. That was one, I was the perfect age to discover The Matrix.
Yeah,
And that was one of the films that people say like this was the Matrix before the Matrix, and
yeah.
discovering that was big for me too.
Be interesting to go back and take a look at it. I have one Fassbender anecdote here. Like for the this guy Michael Balhas was a cinematographer, and
I believe the cinematographer for Goodfellas, right?
Cinematographer for Goodfellas, but then he also shot these Fassbender movies in the 70s, and and now I can't remember exactly which one it was, but I watched one. I was working on a big, dumb, terrible movie that he shot, and I just watched. No, it's not coming to me. But like one of the Fassbender movies he shot, and I was in a meeting. We were waiting for a meeting to start. I was sitting right next to him, and I turned to him and I said, "Oh." Over the weekend, I had just watched whichever one it was, and he turned and looked at me, and then said and was like, and just nothing. Like, fuck you, you little kid, for like trying to talk to me about this stuff. But anyway, that's my only Fassbender.
Understood. Tanchi, a pleasure. Seriously, the greatest compliment is when creators pop in and watch our bullshit. So thank you very much for doing that.
I'd like to carve my square out of that comment.
Here, all right. I'll take you out for a second. I'm kidding.
Oh,
awesome, guys. Seriously, I'm other than my fuckface comment, I'm very thrilled with the conversation tonight. And really, this is exciting. I don't know what our next movie will be.
Yeah,
but I truly appreciate that everyone comes back and we have these like kind of monthly talks. Because frankly, I missed. Again, we we beat the dead horse of Kinescope in a good way.
Do we know who's going to die next? I mean, are we following this? Do we have tabs on anyone? Like,
they say it happens in threes, so maybe we can do 3 weeks and 1 week off, and we'll start doing it that way.
Well, and again, it doesn't. I mean, we started with Pelham 1, 2, 3. It's more of a question of
we don't have a real theme. We could do any movie.
Yeah,
it's. Look, Godard died apparently by of his own choice.
Oh, really? Did he do the George Sanders thing?
I believe it was assisted.
It was assisted suicide.
Okay,
I believe, but
the George Sanders story, of course. He's like, I'm not mad, I'm not depressed, I'm just bored.
Yeah.
Yes, he was. That's a depressed person.
Right. Exactly.
Of course. Yes, but print the legend, as they say in our favorite film, Liberty Bell.
I think that we covered this as a good conversation. I'm glad we did it.
Absolutely, man. No, this was great. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for listening, and join us next time on Scene Missing. Good night, everybody.